So welcome to Kinetica's Talking With Titans online series. My name is Rebecca Fitzgerald and absolutely delighted to be co-hosting this session with my good friend Daniel Davey. So Daniel, I'll pass over to you to give a little introduction to yourself.
So I am Daniel Davey, performance nutritionist. So I work in elite sports, lots of different sports, probably most well known for working in team sport. But I'm a big golf fan, and I also love working with golfers. So I'm very excited about talking nutrition and preparation for all things golf, and I suppose the training and mental side of things as well. So I guess maybe let's start with Lisa, if you want to kind of give us a bit of an introduction as well.
Yeah, for anyone that doesn't know me, my name is Leona Maguire. I'm a former professional golfer at this stage, and still an avid golf fan and overall sports nut. And for this past year, I've been working as a player manager for Modest Golf Management. So I spend my days now travelling outside the ropes versus inside the ropes, and just trying to grow the game as much as I can, since kind of hanging up the golf shoes, I suppose you'd probably call it.
And now over to you, Leona.
Yeah, so I'm Leona Maguire, Lisa's twin sister, obviously, professional golfer on the Ladies European Tour and LPGA. So turned pro June of 2018, and this year was supposed to be my first year on the LPGA.
Oh, supposed to be.
Technically still is, I suppose. It's just on pause.
On pause, exactly. And we're going to come to how all of that feels in a second. So let's hear a little bit about your family, your mum, your dad. We know you have a little brother who's supposed to be doing his leaving cert soon. So give us a little bit of inside goss into what the family structure is like. Lisa, start with you. I think I'm going to call out the names.
So I suppose there's 5 of us here at home. The 2 of us, me and Leona, and then Oran, he's turned 18, I suppose, at this stage. And yeah, like you said, he's getting ready to do his leaving cert, so he's spending a lot of time studying for that. He's an avid golfer as well, so he's trying to take some time out and practice whenever he can. Mom and Dad, Breda and Declan, they're both primary school principals, so as was the same with Oran now, and the same as what we were growing up, they always, I suppose, taught us the importance of putting the studies ahead of sport. Dad's a huge golf fan and a huge sports fan, a big GAA man, so obviously sport was a big background for us growing up, but yeah, obviously school was important too, so it's just trying to find the balance of both here at home.
And then Leona, so I suppose following on from that, if GAA is kind of a bit of the background there, why golf? And I know swimming was a part of some of your I think sporting hobbies as well at one point.
Yeah, I mean, growing up we played pretty much every sport. I mean, there's so many balls and bats and rackets and whatever else around our house. And yeah, we swam a lot when we were younger. And then Lisa broke her elbow when we were about 9 maybe, and fell and tripped in a playground and broke her elbow. And I think one of the specialists she went to told Dad it'd be good to get it moving in, get to play a racket sport, something like that. And when Dad heard racket sport, he heard golf. A golfer himself, he'd been trying to get us to play for a while. We tagged along every once in a while, like caddying for him and stuff like that, but never really played ourselves. And then he bought us 3 clubs. It was like a putter and maybe like a 7-iron and some sort of wood, and yeah, kind of just kicked off from there really. And yeah, 15 years later we're still playing.
And that's one of the biggest things about golf, isn't it? It's really hard to get, I think, especially young girls excited about the game. So how did your dad manage to, I suppose, really grow that love for you girls?
There was definitely a little bit of bribery at the start. And then yeah, bit by bit, I think that first summer he made a bet with us that by the end of the summer we'd prefer golf over swimming, and just bit by bit I think we liked the competitiveness of it. We liked being outside. I suppose it was very different to swimming. Swimming is, every pool's the same. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter what city you're in or what town you're in, the swim pool's still the same. You're still stuck in a boiling pool for hours on end, whereas we liked, I suppose, every golf course different, there was something new every day. So I think that kind of hooked us a little bit, and I suppose we were really lucky that we had the 2 of us. I think some people find golf a little lonely being out there all by yourself, but it's definitely a little easier when you have someone to play with all the time.
And that kind of brings me nicely onto, and you touched on it a little bit, I suppose the competitive nature that you even have amongst yourselves. Is there a bit of that sibling rivalry still today, or how did that play out as you kind of embarked in your career?
Yeah, I think it's always been there. I think we have, generally as a family, you could say we're probably quite competitive. Whether it's like cards or some sort of board game. Monopoly was banned for a number of years for obvious reasons. So yeah, no, we were always very competitive, but it was kind of nice. It never kind of bubbled over after we kind of left the golf course. It might be quiet from like the car journey home from the golf course back home, but then we probably needed each other for something else later on in the evening, so it kind of it petered out eventually. But I think that was kind of nice. Like Leona said, we used to play little games when we started. We were lucky enough to start. There's a little par 3 course at Slee Russell, and that's kind of where we started. And even at the start, we found it like it was really hard and it was really difficult. And I remember Dad always used to start us with little goals. So the par down there would be 27, and he'd be like, okay, the first to break 50. And then it'd be the first to break 45, and then 40 and 35. And it was always a competition. If one person broke 50, then the goal the next time was to see who could get to 45 first. And I remember even when we got our first handicaps, we started off at 36, and that was kind of the competition. If someone lost a couple of shots one day and then you were trying to lose it the next day, so that was kind of nice. But it never got to a point where it ever got too much or there was rows over it. It was just kind of, it kept us going, I suppose. And I suppose that's the one thing we kind of missed maybe from the team sports. When you played the team sports, you kind of had your teammates kind of pushing you on, and everyone was kind of in it together, whereas we kind of turned golf in, while it was an individual sport, we kind of turned it into our own little sort of team sport, which was kind of nice and kind of different, I suppose, than what most people had.
Leona and Lisa, I've had the good fortune of meeting your wonderful parents, and I got a great insight to how supportive that they've been throughout this, I suppose, to where you are now, but right from the beginning. You've given some nice insights to your dad, Declan. What about Mum? What sort of role has she played?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose Mom's one of those people that's probably spent more time on a golf course and has never actually hit a shot herself. She happily walks outside the ropes, enjoys being out on the golf course, being out in the fresh air. Yeah, she's long been the taxi driver and the chef and laundry doer and all the rest, all the things behind the scenes, making sure the homework was done before we went out in case we tried to sneak out with having that done. And yeah, I mean, they've both been a tremendous support for us for a long time, and we definitely couldn't have done it without all the time and effort and money and everything that they have put into both our careers.
One other very quick question. I was fascinated quite recently with Rory McIlroy's podcast, and he mentioned about how many holes he used to play when he was young. Do you have any recollection of playing crazy numbers of holes on any given day or week?
We're kind of lucky we're so close to the golf course here. I suppose we had a lot of summers growing up where we used to get dropped up in the morning. Whenever it was light, 7-8 o'clock in the morning. And I think it must have been in the early years because we didn't even have a phone at the time. And actually one of the holes of the par 3 runs quite close to the road. So we were just within distance that we could use walkie-talkies. So Dad had one walkie-talkie with us. One walkie-talkie was at home. So whenever you wanted lunch, you went down to the gate. You got on the walkie-talkie to see if Mom would drop you up a sandwich. So that kind of got to the day. We didn't go home at all during the day. It was just kind of you stayed and played away until it was dark, until it was ready to come home or someone came and got you. But yeah, that was probably the thing that I think Santi brought us walkie-talkies one year that they were bought for, and then the mobile phones obviously followed shortly thereafter. And that was one of the main buying factors for the phone was that we could ring to become got, or that Mom could get a hold of us more so than anything else to know that we were actually okay and still hadn't fell out, I suppose, too.
That's such a lovely insight into, I suppose, your home environment and your parents and your brother. So then what was it like if you were, you obviously headed up to the States for university. Can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, the college you went to and how different it was being so far away from home, a different setup to the Irish setup, all that sort of good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we went to Duke in North Carolina, I suppose Duke was probably one of the smaller schools we looked at. Only 5,500 students, so we didn't want to go to a sort of a massive US university where, I mean, we're from a small town, a rural area, so we didn't want to go to a major city. And Duke's sort of academic and golf programs have always been regarded as some of the best in the country. And I suppose Mum and Dad were keen that we'd get a good degree. At the same time that it'd be actually worth something when we came home, and then at the same point it was one of the best golf programs in the country, so it was an easy choice in that regard. And then I think we got our Leaving Cert results on the Wednesday and headed for the States on the Friday. Mom went with us so that she could help us sort of get everything we needed when we got over there and settled into the dorms and all of that, and she maybe stayed about 5 days a week, something like that, got us all settled in, and then we were on our own. And those first few nights were definitely a bit strange. I suppose we shared a room growing up, we always have, so that was kind of the same. So it was nice to kind of have that little bit of similarity when we first went over there. And I suppose college in the States is a little different. It's not like here where a lot of our friends that were in college in Dublin or Maynooth or wherever went home at the weekends. Nobody in the US went home at weekends, so we were kind of all in the same boat. And there was so much stuff going on. There was your schoolwork to do, and then there was, I mean, being big sports fans ourselves, we were at a soccer game or a basketball game or hockey match, or we were at something different every weekend or every other day of the week. So there wasn't as much time to be homesick. You weren't sitting around wondering what everybody else was doing. And then sort of we rang home in the evenings or whatever like that every few days just to check in with everybody.
And Lisa, what about yourself?
I suppose it was just a little different. I suppose we'd always seen like American college or American universities kind of in movies, and I suppose that was the one big thing. We actually got to go over because we were considered international students. We got a few days kind of head start on everybody to kind of move in. I suppose our corridor had a lot of athletes. The hockey team had kind of already moved in because they'd been doing pre-season training, so we'd kind of met a few people. But I'll never forget the two girls that moved in kind of across the hall from us. When we landed, we had like a suitcase each, and then Mom had the suitcase that was still full of our stuff. So between us all, we had 3 suitcases full of our stuff and 2 backpacks. And then a big U-Haul truck arrived for the two across the hall. And they took in and they gutted the rooms. The rooms in the dorm were very simple. They just had 2, they called them lofted beds, so you could put stuff underneath, and they had a desk and a wee table and a small little walk-in wardrobe type thing. And they came in, they gutted the room, lifted the carpets, put up their own curtains, had everything was kind of embroidered with their initials. I remember we looked at Mom just kind of with our kind of jaw on the floor, and she was like, right. She was like, I'm off. Do you need anything else? And it was just it was the stark difference between kind of us coming with the 2 suitcases. But we had everything we needed in the 2 suitcases, and we were grand and happy out. But so I suppose when everybody asks, is it like the movies? Yeah, it's like the movies. It definitely is. They had like the dress gowns with their initials, the towels had the initials. It was incredible. Yeah.
They were worried about what sorority they were going to get into, and we were worried about what match we were going to go to, or what score we'd had on the golf course that day. So we definitely had very different priorities.
Oh, that's brilliant. Daniel, over to you.
Well, I'm really fascinated with that story, and I'm fascinated as well with what that environment must have been like. Can you give us a bit of an insight to what it was like going to college with these people, and obviously really ambitious people with big goals, and also maybe just tag on at the end how you feel that whole experience has influenced you, and being around those people have influenced you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Duke's reputation kind of precedes itself all around the US. It was a lot of people that had been to elite private boarding schools. These people were paying $75,000 a year to go to Duke. So they were all making sure they were, whether it was in their athletics, people wanted to go into careers in medicine, law. I mean, I remember at the commencement, there was sort of like a big mass and an introduction sort of thing, one of the first weeks, and they had outlined what everybody had, well, not everybody, but some people had done before they'd actually got into Duke. And there was people that had worked on cancer teams and developed engines for race cars and all this sort of stuff. and we just done the leaving cert and just headed off. So we kind of felt quite sort of inadequate compared to all these people. And I suppose that was the great thing of being at somewhere with Duke. Everybody was striving to be the best. There was no oh, what are you doing that for? Or why are you working hard? It was, look what they're doing, I want to be like that too. And it didn't really matter what area it was in. And everybody sort of brought each other on. Whether it was, I mean, you were surrounded by Olympians, people that were like guys on the basketball team that you just knew were going to the NBA the next year, and all these people that had big fancy internships. I remember we were in a finance class, corporate finance, and I think it was in 2016, and he went at the start of the class, he did like the icebreakers, whatever, and he said, introduce yourself, say where you're from, and what internship you had this past summer. And obviously me and Lisa hadn't done any internships, and luckily it was 2016, and we went around and everybody was saying that I had an internship with Goldman Sachs and I had an internship with JP Morgan, and listing out all these big companies. And one of my friends went first, and she was Madison, and I had an internship at Goldman Sachs, and I'm Leona, and I didn't have an internship anywhere this summer. And then someone else picked up, yeah, but you went to the Olympics. So it was still like a very it was a really good environment, and everybody kind of supported each other and brought each other on, which was quite nice. And I suppose me and Lisa have never been really ones to want to stand out, and that was the nice thing to do. Being very, very good at whatever you did, it didn't make you exceptional or extraordinary in any way. It just made you kind of very similar to everybody else, which was nice.
That's really, 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 that's a great story. That's obviously somebody that you got on well with, that kind of piped up there and said, well, you did go to the Olympics. And it's always nice when somebody else says it when you don't have to say it. I want to go back to you, Lisa, for a second, and just, I suppose, if you're reflecting on your time, you did psychology and marketing, is that right?
Yep. Yeah.
If you're to look, I suppose, through your time in Duke and say, if I had this piece of advice, or if somebody was going to Duke and if they knew this, what would it be?
I suppose, first off, I'd advise anyone that's going to the States to college, whether that's for academics or sports, just to do your research. I suppose no two colleges are the same, and I don't know, it surprises me so much how many people go without properly doing their research, and then they wonder why they want to come home at Christmas time. The first thing I'd advise anyone, and I'd advise strongly against it, is not, a lot of people don't even visit where they're going to go. Like as an athlete, and if you're going on a scholarship, or even if you're not going on a scholarship, you're entitled to a visit from the college. So I'd strongly encourage anyone to, if you're thinking about it, you can go on 5 visits, a maximum of 5 visits. So you've nothing to lose. Go visit. The college will pay for you to go visit, and you might as well see what sort of resources they have to offer. And that was kind of the nice thing. That was the thing that me and Leona did. We went by ourselves, we went without mom and dad, and that was kind of the idea behind that, was that we'd have our own decision where we wanted to go, and we visited 5 colleges, and that was, and we could make our own decision. It was kind of an independent choice, and I think that's what mom and dad said to us, and kind of stressed the importance of, well, it's going to be where you're living for the next 4 years. It's the call you're going to make for the rest of your life. It really doesn't make a pin of a difference whether they like it and whether they approve of it. If you're going to be there and unhappy for 4 years, well, then you might as well not go. So that was the best thing. I think at Halloween of our 6th year, I'm going to say, we visited Duke, and I suppose there and then I was kind of blown away by the facilities. I suppose that was the thing that was great for us. We could live on campus, you could walk to everything, all the facilities right there, where that was the gym. Then you had kind of lecture halls, everything like that, dining halls, and then the golf course was, again, it was within like a 10-minute walk. But yeah, no, looking back on it, I suppose it was just, you probably didn't realise it at the time, but it was just a matter of soaking everything in. I suppose you had the unreal experience of going to the basketball games, and I suppose Cameron Indoor is kind of known all around the world in basketball circles, and because it's such a small stadium, the atmosphere was just electric every time. And I suppose the more games you went to, you probably took it a little bit more for granted. It was just kind of when you talk to other people, maybe when we were playing at golf tournaments or in pro-ams, and they asked you where you went to college, and then the first question they always ask is, well, have you been to a basketball game? How many basketball games did you go to? So, and only then you kind of realise, you know what, I was actually part of something so special, and I had the opportunity to literally walk from my room 1 minute and be there kind of another minute and be kind of part of something so historic and something so special. So no, it was a matter of soaking everything in. Like Leona said, we had the opportunity to kind of mingle with so many people from so many different walks of life that we never would have got. I suppose it just kind of opened your eyes up, I suppose, a little bit to what the world kind of has to offer. And I think personally, I'd say it was a great opportunity to get supposed to mature and get more independent. I suppose there's nothing that'll do that more than moving halfway across the world, and even simple things like learning how to do your laundry, learn how to cook, do everything for yourself, and not have to, shout down the hall to see how you're going to do it. So it was a learning experience. It was probably a humbling experience too, more than anything else. And that kind of idea that you literally, whatever you wanted, you had to do yourself. And kind of, if you wanted to go practice, you went and practiced. If you wanted to do your homework, you did your homework, and you were kind of more accountable. You were just on less spoon-fed, I suppose, more than anything else. You were kind of, now you're adult, kind of, you have all these responsibilities, and you kind of have to take ownership of your own work and your own life. So for that sense, yeah, definitely wouldn't regret it whatsoever.
I can see that both of you must get on really well, because there's so much being soaked up there. You've got about, I asked for one piece of advice, you give me about 8.
She's taking all 9.
But I love it. I mean, it's really obvious that you embrace the environment. You took in, and like you said, you soaked up everything that the environment had to offer. But what I really like, and it probably comes back to why you've achieved so much, your focus on preparation, doing your research, knowing what you were going into, and having that kind of mindset that you were going to embrace whatever came in front of you. So that was really good. What about you, Leona?
Yeah, I suppose the big question I always get when people sort of ask, should I go to college and where should I go? It's always, well, what do you want? Why are you going? And for us, we wanted good academics and really good golf. We wanted to go somewhere that was warm. We didn't want somewhere that was colder than it was going to be here in Ireland. We didn't want to have snow in the winter, so North Carolina was perfect for that. And I suppose it was just a case of making the most of the opportunities that we had when we were there. Some of them were more easily accessible than others, and some of them you had to work a little bit harder for, whether that be talking to different alumni, just make different professors. It was amazing the people we met as part of the university, people from sort of all walks of life, whether that be professors that had really interest in research, or obviously Coach K was there, who's been one of the best coaches of all time. Our coach, Coach Brooks, what he's done over the years, other Olympians, different students from all around the world. And it's just a case of making the most of those opportunities. Definitely sort of worth it in the end.
Probably said too, it's not that it wasn't easy. I suppose there was lots of challenges along the way. I suppose for me, the one thing that'll always stand out in my mind was kind of starting our freshman year, first semester, we all had to take a writing class. And the way the college system, you kind of have to, everybody signs up for colleges at the one time across the board every year, and you have to be kind of ready. You kind of have your classes selected in kind of like a shopping cart kind of format, and you have to be ready when, say, the clock goes 9 o'clock to press your classes.
They're like concert tickets.
Yeah, like concert tickets, pretty much. And there's obviously some classes that are highly sought after and some that aren't. But our first year, we all had to take a writing class. There was this one class called Decoding Disney. They all had a theme. There was all different themes. So obviously, Decoding Disney, only 15 people may be allowed into the class. This was the one that everyone was sought after. And when it came to 9 o'clock, Leona hugged all the Wi-Fi signals. So Leona got Decoding Disney freshman semester.
Ninja reflexes.
Lisa got a class called Land of the Free. I didn't really know what it was, and got there anyway, whatever date in August, sat down in the class, and when we got back in the room in the evening, we were kind of talking about it. Leona was like, yeah, it was great. I was like, what did your professor give you for homework? She was like, oh, I'm watching Up. That's my homework. I'm watching Up. And she was like, what did you get? And I was like, oh, well, the professor handed me the US Constitution and told me I probably should learn that. So needless to say, for the rest of the semester, I spent most of the time in the evenings Googling what everybody said during the class so that I could maybe go back the next day and make some sort of contribution. But yeah, well, Leona watched Up and ended up writing a paper on
Mary Poppins.
And I had an end of term paper on recidivism and social or solitary confinement in the US prison system. So there was definitely a varying degree in college. But yeah, you learn something new every day, or you learn something new every semester as it was.
With golf, with any sport, but I think particularly with golf, and I can say this as a really high handicapper, that you can play amazing one day and then have a shocker the next day. You can have amazing one hole and the next hole, it goes totally awry. How do you, from a mental perspective, pick yourself back up again when it comes to those types of games or those days or those tournaments even?
Yeah, I mean, golf's a very humbling game. I suppose it's unusual in terms of other sports in that when you reach the top of golf, you probably lose more times than you win. At least if you're atop of the tennis world or the Usain Bolt or someone like that, you're pretty much winning most of the time. Whereas even with a Rory McIlroy or even when Tiger was at his best, he wasn't winning even over half of his tournaments. So I suppose to be a good golfer, you need a short memory. You have to be able to let the last hole go or the last shot go, and it's always a case of, okay, how can I put this next shot in the best position to get the lowest score? And it's easier said than done. But I suppose that experience of just knowing, okay, I can get out of this situation. I've practiced this. I've done this before. I suppose that confidence in golf for me always came from knowing that I'd done it in practice, knowing that I'd hit that shot hundreds of thousands of times in practice, knowing that I could pull it off.
I'm fascinated by reset and staying in the moment. And one of the things that I noticed in golf, and having watched a lot of golf, is that golfers have different little techniques, little things that they do to reset. Something that I was taught was, after you've hit a bad shot, take a step away and practice your swing. Have either of you got any little techniques like that to bring you back in the moment or reset?
I suppose for me personally, I know when I hit a bad shot, a lot of the time I tend to speed up and start walking faster and want to get into the next shot. So it's kind of just checking myself and maybe taking a drink of water and then slowing down. Or I know my caddy Gary, he might pull out a banana or do something or ask a question just to stop me from tearing off down the fairway after my ball. So yeah, I would definitely agree with Lisa in that a good caddy will definitely recognize the signs and be able to sort of snap you out of it.
How do you go about picking a caddy, and how long do you stay with the caddy? Like, how does that all work?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose they're the person in your team that you spend probably the most time with. When we're in tournament weeks, I spend more time with Gary than I do with anybody else. Between practice rounds and tournament rounds and just practice, and you could be spending 8 hours a day with this person. So you have to get along with them, number one. I suppose the advice that was given to me was you find a good person first, someone that you get along with. You can teach someone to be a good caddy. You can't get rid of necessarily their negative personality traits. If you don't get along with them, there's no point. They could be the best caddy in the world, but if they're annoying you every hole, well then there's no point. So different people look for different things in a caddy. I suppose me coming from college, it was the biggest thing for me was getting used to having a caddy there. I'd gone 4 years having nobody there. The coaches, we had 2 coaches in college. They were able to float around, but they were floating around between 5 players, and a lot of the time I wasn't the one needing the most help, so I didn't see the coach that often. So it was definitely different having someone there all the time. And yeah, I mean, a caddy they wear a lot of hats and do a lot of things behind the scenes that people probably don't realize. And I've been working with Gary now since the start of the year, so he's Scottish. So it's been working well so far. I think Scottish and Irish are quite similar in that regard. So he gets my humour and can understand me a little bit, and thankfully his accent isn't too thick.
And he probably said the same about you.
A lot of the Americans, they'll hear us talking, and then I suppose we both speak so fast and not all that loud. So yeah, some of the Americans have a tough time.
He has a problem with, when, I don't know, maybe it's like a Calvin thing. If you're answering like yes to someone, you're just going to go, you kind of like take a deep like a breath in almost. You don't actually say the word. He thought for a while. He said he lived for a while in Drogheda, and he said he noticed it down there too. And then he thought for a while that some people had like a breathing problem. He couldn't. And he said he had forgotten about it until he came to work with Leona again, and she kept doing it. And he
I think we were on about the 12th hole before he got up the courage to ask what was the story with it. But
are you talking about people go like, yep, that?
Yeah. Like, I'll never respond to a question with yes. I go, yeah. And he started to do it now, which is quite funny, and I'll point it out to him.
That's a really good insight, especially I suppose for anyone who's not massively familiar with the game and maybe just getting into it. But I mean, Lisa, you had to make a really difficult decision a couple of years ago. Tell us about that journey. Who helped you to make the decision, and how did you know it was the right one for you to make?
Yeah, I suppose it's never easy, I suppose, to make kind of the bigger life decisions. I suppose it's something that you don't want to make too rashly or too hastily. But at the same time, I think when the time comes around, I think deep down you kind of know it yourself. I suppose I enjoyed my time in college golf. I'd had a successful amateur career. I probably knew in my heart of heart that golf probably wasn't trending as far up as it had done in previous years. So it was a bit of a gamble to turn pro at the time after college, but it was still something that I felt I wanted to do and give it a good go. And I did it for 2 years, but I suppose towards the end of last summer, I kind of sat down with everybody, coaches, mum and dad, Mark over at Modest, and we just kind of had an honest kind of discussion about it. An honest discussion of where I thought everything was at, where they thought everything was at, where my goals were at. And ultimately, I felt it was the right time to kind of step aside and kind of move on to something else. I suppose down through the years, I've always probably prided myself on whatever I wanted to do. I wanted to do it well. I was always very concerned with giving everything 100%, 110%. I never wanted to do anything kind of half do anything, whether that was golf or school. So I suppose it got to a point where it was very frustrating for me to give kind of 110% to something and to not kind of be getting the same results back or the same results that I'd expect to get back. So yeah, I suppose that for me, I felt like the decision kind of made itself somewhat. Golf was still a huge passion of mine. Sport was a huge passion of mine, and I never wanted it to get to a point where I resented a game that had given me so much. I still think golf should be a sport for life, and I suppose I always considered that even if I didn't play it professionally or competitively, that I still wanted it to be something that I could play socially with friends. I suppose it still has a huge part to play in a lot of business. The lessons you can learn from golf is still incredible down to the years. It can teach you so many things.
Yeah, so Leona, you had a decision to make when you were in Duke around going pro or finishing out your degree. How did you make that decision?
It definitely wasn't one that was made overnight. There was a lot of late night phone calls back and forth to Dad, because we were over in college at the time. A lot of meetings with my coaches over there. Talks with Shane, my coach, on the phone as well. And I suppose it was just a case of maybe taking a sort of more long-term perspective. I think I was in such a rush to get on the LPGA tour and want to play professional golf that I kind of lost track of how great Duke was and sort of the environment I was in at the time. And when I sort of sat down and took stock of all the great things that Duke had to offer, it was not a case of why should I stay, it was a case of why should I leave here earlier than I need to leave here. And that kind of became apparent when it was getting closer to the time where I needed to decide. And I was in Coach Brooks's office, and he marched me over to the director of athletics office, Dr. White, and he kind of sat down and talked me through all the options and sort of what it meant to be a Duke athlete and the value of getting a degree from Duke, and just kind of stressed the importance of looking at that long-term picture. I think in sort of all sports right now, people are very quick to specialize early, and everything's just in such a rush. See people maybe turn a pro when they're 15, 16 in golf, and then 5 years later they're nowhere to be seen. And I suppose it was a case of sticking to my guns. I've always done everything in quite a methodical way, making sure I worked my way up the levels, sort of achieving everything at every junior golf, amateur golf, college golf all the way through that, and me and Shane have worked to quite a plan on that. And it was one of the meetings we had actually with, it was John, our assistant coach, kind of sat me down and he said, I don't think you've won enough in college golf. Deadly serious, and that was 2.5 years in. I think I'd won 4 times maybe, and straight out said, you haven't won enough. You've been close a lot of times, yes, you've been player of the year, blah blah blah, but you haven't won enough. And I paused for a second. I was a little annoyed at first, and then I was like, no, yeah, you're right. So then after I stayed, and in the next year and a half I won 7 times, and kind of saw it as more of a challenge than anything else. And I remember then we got to one of our last tournaments and he said, yeah, you remember what I said to you a year and a half ago? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, I think you've won enough now. I think you're ready. So it's just a case of leaning on. I suppose we've both been very fortunate that we've had a lot of people give us some very sound advice over the years. We've always had a great team around us that have had our best interest at heart, and sort of trusting that they did have our best interest at heart. There was a lot of people over the years that said, turn pro now, when are you going to turn pro? And for me, it was always a case of when, not if. But I do it on my terms and when I was ready.
It's really obvious from talking to you that you're incredibly resilient. You've been like sponges around amazing coaches. Do you work with a sports psychologist, or is that something that you invest time in at the moment?
The short answer is no. I don't work with a sports psychologist. I've gone to ones here and there over the years. I do have a psychology degree. So for me, I don't like sitting in a room and someone tell me you're the best, tell yourself the best, you're going to do it. That really does nothing for me. I get my confidence in knowing that I've done it hundreds of times. I've held this putt, I've hit this shot. And sort of, I suppose I like more the sort of Dave Allred style practice, where that you practice under high pressure situations, and then when it actually comes to the tournament, it doesn't feel as bad. I've been in situations where I thought I'd be way more nervous than I actually was, but because sort of the way you practice and stuff, it kind of prepares you for that. Definitely from talking to people like Padraig Carnage and stuff, and I know he's done a lot. I've read Bob Bertella's books and stuff like that, and all the time just trying to pick up little bits. I do like Alistair McCaw's podcast, Champion Minded, and stuff like that. So there's stuff like that. You're definitely learning all the time, in one capacity or another.
I'm definitely fascinated with the level of focus that you need to have for a round and what part nutrition plays. So Daniel, I'll pass it over to you if you want to delve into that area.
I obviously working as a performance nutritionist, I have seen the value in getting your nutrition right, and I know that it's something that you girls have been looking at for a long time, for certainly as long as 10 years, maybe very much ahead of your field. Maybe talk a little bit from how that came about, how nutrition was valued in your home, and how you've seen it influence your own performances.
It probably came from swimming a little bit at the start. We would have got a little bit of nutrition advice when we were swimming, and then Dad's own sort of interest in sport. He would have coached camogie teams and football teams, so over the years he would have got advice from different nutritionists, stuff what they should be doing before matches and after matches and all that sort of thing. And then it kind of just spilled over to us playing our golf, and we would have always ate pretty healthily here at home. Dad's had sort of vegetables growing here on and off over the years. We've had hens for eggs. He had turkeys for years for Christmas and stuff like that. So I suppose that's one of the perks of being in the countryside. You can sort of grow your own stuff and be a little bit self-sufficient that way. And Mom's a good cook, so she's always there's always been plenty of choice here of what to eat. We'll never go hungry, but it's always been good food. And yeah, I suppose Anthony looked sort of for that edge, probably as well. Sort of golf is a game of very fine margins, and you're out there for a long time on the golf course. You could be out there anywhere between 4 to 6 hours maybe. So sort of concentration and energy levels is definitely a big thing. So that's where the sort of hydration and nutrition plays a big role. And you see a lot of people over the years that they're going great guns, and then they come to the last 4 holes of a round and they just crash. People wonder why, what happens, and they don't lose their swing in those last 4 holes. It's that what went on before that sort of they're running on empty when it comes, especially in those, even the last day of a tournament. If it's, especially for us, I suppose in amateur golf, it's not so much in pro golf. In amateur golf, you play a lot of 36-hole rounds, and you could have 3 days of that back to back. And that's probably when we started looking into it a bit more of, okay, what do I need to do to make sure my body's in the same, or at least as close to the same state on day 3 as it was on that first 36 round on the first day.
That's absolutely amazing. When did you start to recognize its value? Because I still think within golf that people, generally speaking, there's not enough people are recognizing how powerful nutrition can be for your performance. And the next part of that, I'll let you speak about this, is give us a little bit of an insight to how you prepare.
Yeah, I suppose golf probably gets a bad reputation. Stereotypical people associate golf with the halfway house and the fellas drinking beer in their buggies on the way around and all of that, and eating their hot dogs and their burgers and whatever else. And I know when we started in different teams, and for some reason there was always, I don't know where it came from, but Jaffa cakes were always a big thing with golfers, having a roll of Jaffa cakes in your golf bag. I don't really know why. You would have seen a lot of girls with like Lucozade Sports and like very sugary drinks, and then like Jaffa cakes and Mars bars and stuff like that in their golf bags. And I suppose we then sort of started like having sort of, Mom would have made like oat bars and stuff like that for us. Some of your recipes, Daniel, probably. The ILGU, we would have had different nutritionists come in to talk to teams over the years. I mean, we were 12 and 13 going to some Irish camps. They used to do hydration tests on us in the mornings, so and stuff like that. So we definitely were conscious of it. And we probably didn't realise how important it was, but we definitely sort of were on the tracks of it.
You've got competition on a Saturday. How do you prepare? What's in your bag? What are the kind of things that you bring with you for a round? I suppose
the big thing for me, adjusting sort of from college golf to pro golf, is definitely managing the travel and the back-to-back weeks. And I'm sure in college golf it was you played a tournament, then you had a few weeks off, as opposed to us where we're playing Thursday through Sunday, getting on a plane or driving on a Monday, and then heading straight to an event starting again on Thursday. So it's a lot of golf it's a long and a slow sport, but I've kind of changed my thinking in my nutrition along with Sharon in that we don't really consider it as days. It's more time blocks. When there's a late tea time, say on a Thursday, and then an early tea time on the Friday, and making sure that window, we don't really treat them as 2 separate days. It's all one continuous block. If it's an early start, having enough to eat the night before, maybe a little extra the night before to carry me over. I suppose I've been lucky that I don't get too nervous in that I can't eat the next morning, but at the same time making sure that there's enough sort of in the tank and on reserves for when I need it. And I think even Gary, I suppose, looking in my golf bag, was surprised by the amount of food that's actually in my golf bag. Where I'll have 2 Kinetica ready to drinks in my bag. I'll usually have a banana. I'll have 2 Kinetica bars in my bag as well. And then usually a sandwich of some sort, either with peanut butter maybe, or like a chicken or a turkey or something like that. And there's stuff I can control, I can bring with me no matter where I go in the world. I like having the control over knowing it's going to be the exact same for every tournament, and I know what I should be eating, when I should be eating it, and why I'm eating it as well.
It's absolutely amazing to talk to somebody with such a thorough plan and such a good, concise understanding of what's important. I think anybody who's listening, any young girls, any young guys, can learn so much from that.
I'd like to chat, I suppose, a little bit about Lisa's journey now. I mean, Lisa, you had to make a really difficult decision a couple of years ago. Tell us about that journey and who helped you to make the decision, and how did you know it was the right one for you to make?
I always considered that even if I didn't play it professionally or competitively, that I still wanted it to be something that I could play socially with friends. I suppose it still has a huge part to play in a lot of business right now, and just I think the lessons you can learn from golf is still incredible down to the years. It can teach you so many things at any sort of level across the board and at any age. So and the transition worked well, kind of working from playing playing professionally and then kind of moving outside the ropes to kind of working with Modest, which was kind of nice. I could kind of give back to a game that had kind of given me so much over the last 15 years. I probably didn't expect it to come so soon, but I never wanted it to get to a point in my life where maybe 5 years down the road that I find myself just kind of floating along or drifting along. I kind of wanted to give something else 110%, and I suppose I kind of just felt like it was the right time.
I think me at 25, I definitely wouldn't have had that same level of, I suppose, knowing I was making the right decision for me. I would have really relied on my parents a lot. Did anyone, when you had that sit-down meeting, did anyone try and persuade you otherwise, or did they know you were set in your ways?
Yeah, I suppose the main thing was it wasn't a decision that was made overnight. I suppose it was hashed out over a number of weeks, months even. And I suppose Mum and Dad were incredibly supportive. They've been incredibly supportive of anything that we've ever wanted to do, whether that was golf, academics, anything of the sort. And I suppose it got to a point probably I wasn't enjoying it as much as I have done. And I suppose Mum could probably see that more than anybody else. I think people forget that golf, traveling the world playing golf, it does seem quite luxurious and quite fun and a good lifestyle to have. But when you're kind of going from week to week, you're playing on kind of the European tour. The events are in kind of nicer places, and you're kind of you're not staying in the Ritz, and the golf courses mightn't be up to as much standard, and it's you're going back to a hotel room by yourself, or you're going back to an Airbnb by yourself, and it's not all it's cracked up to be. So I suppose the way I put it, there were a huge amount of high moments in my career, but towards the end there were low moments where I kind of had to take a step back and kind of look at it from kind of an objective view and say, if anybody was kind of looking at my life right now, what advice would they give to me if you kind of take any sort of bias out of it that way?
Well, you can totally tell that you're pretty much made for the role you're in at the moment. So I just know from already dealing with you that you're a total natural. So it seems like it's been quite a smooth transition, which is amazing. What would you think, and we kind of touched on it earlier around, I suppose, young girls and getting into golf, and what are you doing to, I suppose, try and promote the sport for women? And maybe it's through Leona, maybe it's through your own initiatives. Are you involved in it from that angle?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I think is a huge area that needs to be targeted over the next coming years. I suppose I look back to when Leona and myself started playing golf. We were the only two girls that play golf at our golf club. There was only lads to play with, and that I think that experience is kind of would resonate with a lot of young girls that have kind of grown up through the years of trying to play on the boys' teams. Or the big difference we found was a lot of people maybe that might play golf during the summer and then they might drop off because their parents go back to work and probably don't have time to go out with them in the evenings. Whereas if you go to football training, you always have that group there and there's that sense of camaraderie. And I suppose that's the thing that Leona and myself had that probably a lot of people didn't have, that maybe didn't have an older sibling that was playing golf or a younger sibling that was playing golf. We had our own little team and you had that sense of company, so you didn't feel as lonely. So no, I think anything that we can do, I suppose, as part of Modest, we're trying to get kind of more visibility for ladies playing in golf. I suppose that's the great thing with Leona on the LPGA tour right now. Kind of young girls coming up through the ranks have someone to look up to and someone that they can see kind of playing professionally and can see doing well. And I suppose that's the key thing, even with the 20 by 20 campaign, is just getting that sort of visibility, whether that be in the media and the participation and even people volunteer. And I suppose if you actually can't see people doing it, you don't realize how possible it is. And I suppose if you kind of, the more you can get your story out there, I suppose if you look at Leona's kind of journey up through the ranks, we come from a very normal sort of background in rural Cavan, and if you can kind of make it and play elite level golf in Ireland, internationally, go to college in the States and play professionally, I suppose if you'd have told someone that 15 years ago, they probably would have laughed at you. Even the tournament that we run up in Northern Ireland, there's a huge emphasis on kind of having equality between men and women, giving women the opportunity to play professionally. I suppose one of my best memories probably playing golf was in the amateurs when we had the Irish Open in Killeen Castle back 2009, 10, 11, and the crowds we drew out there was incredible. I suppose that's the nice thing about Irish people. I think we love sport just as a nation, and you tend to rally behind the sports people. So I think it's just giving people that opportunity to see it. I suppose a lot of people are very quick to judge and be like, oh, well, the women's game, it's not as fast and there's not the same speed and power. I suppose Leona's never going to be like the build of a Dustin Johnson that's going to be carrying it 310 yards, but actually it's amazing when people do come out to watch ladies playing tournaments, and I definitely heard that feedback whenever people do come watch. It's like, oh, I wish I watched ladies golf all the time. I wish this is the game I need to watch, because there's so many lessons I can take from this, whether it's the finesse that people use and the control and the quality of the short game and the dedication. And I suppose it's just kind of giving them that platform, and whether that's through social media, putting videos out there. I suppose the main thing I'd say to people is don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to reach out to people and literally just ask. If you don't have anyone kind of that's playing golf in your house and you kind of want to get started, I suppose start small. It's the same way as we started. Everybody starts the same way. You start with 1 club, 2 clubs. You start chipping into an umbrella in the back garden into a little basket, and then you might move on to the driving range, and then you move on to pitch and putt. And it's all about keeping it fun and keeping it interesting. And I suppose the mindset you have to play any sort of competitive sport is completely transferable, whether that's golf or football or rugby. But ultimately, in 10 years' time, we'd like more people to be playing golf and more people to be sticking with playing golf. I suppose there's probably more demographics of people like teenage girls that we would like to kind of stick with it. I suppose even we saw when we were doing our leaving cert, you always get the talk when you go in 5th year. It's kind of, well, now girls, this is the sport kind of has to take a back seat now and kind of dedicate towards your studies. And I think that I hate that aspect of it. I think you're well able to do both. Fair enough, you can't do both to a completely elite level, but I suppose sport for us kept us sane and gave us a good break, and we got 2 very good leaving certs and still were able to play. Like I said it before too, the lessons you have and the values you learn and the skills you learn playing elite sport are completely transferable to kind of, whether that be in academics or the workplace or just everyday life.